It is so very good to see your faces, to be here together in this sacred space on this day of new beginnings. As I look out, I feel not only the joy of this moment, but also its undeniable weight. We do not enter the sanctuary and simply leave the world behind. We carry it with us. Our anxieties for our loved ones, our grief for a world that feels so dangerously fractured, our own private sorrows that have accompanied us through the past year. We are raw. We are, many of us, hurting. We are holding so much. We carry the echoes of shattering events, the ache of unresolved grief, the weariness that comes from a world that feels colder, more hostile than it did a year ago. We are caught in the whirlwind of headlines, of loyalties, of anguished cries from every corner of the earth, and from the deepest corners of our own hearts. And the first step to get beyond it, the only possible first step, is to see each other, to look across the room and to recognize the pain, the fear, the hope, the confusion, and yes, also the love in each other's eyes. Because before we can talk about our covenant with God, we must honor the covenant we have with one another. Here, in this room, to be a community that holds each other's truth, even when they are complicated, even when they feel contradictory. Into this space of inner turmoil, our traditions give us a story we are about to read. The Akedah, the binding of Isaac. A tale so stark, so unsettling, it feels less like a comforting text and more like a theological earthquake. It forces us to ask the most difficult questions. What is our nature of our relationship with God? What does it mean to be in a covenant? And what happens when the divine's will seems to contradict the very promise upon which the covenant is built? For centuries, we have been taught to see this as a story about Abraham's faith. And it is. But what if it is not only about Abraham's faith? What if it is also about the faith of our God? I will try to explain. The story is built on a paradox that is almost impossible to resolve. God has promised Abram explicitly that his future, the entire covenant, will flow through Isaac. And then that same God commands Abram to destroy that future with his own hands. This is not just a difficult command, it is a divine self-contradiction. The God of promise is seemingly at war with the God of command. And what does Abraham do? He says nothing. This is the man who argued with God for the lives of strangers in Sodom. The man who had the holy chutzpah to demand of the heavens, shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? Why is he now so silent? Perhaps his silence is not passive submission. Perhaps it is the most audacious act of faith imaginable. Perhaps Abraham, hearing this impossible command, decides to test that promise. He decides to test God. He is, in effect, calling God's bluff. His every step up the mountain is a question. Are you the God who breaks promises? Are you the God who will nullify our covenant? Are you the God I have come to know, the God of faithfulness and life? Abram's faith is not in the command to kill. His faith is in the covenant that makes the command impossible. He is betting everything not on his own obedience, but on God's integrity. This is not putting God on trial out of lack of faith. It is the opposite. It is a faith so profound that it is willing to walk to the very edge of the abyss, trusting that the covenant partner will not let you fall. It redefines our relationship with God not as the master and slave, but as a living, breathing partnership where both parties are bound by the terms of the agreement. And in the end, when the angel's voice cries out, it is not just Abram who passes the test, God passes too. God shows that God is the God who keeps the promise the covenant holds. This story has troubled the greatest philosophical minds for centuries, precisely because it stages the ultimate conflict, the collision between the voice of God and the human conscience. Thinkers have asked, must we suspend our own sense of right and wrong in the face of a higher command? Our tradition, in its deepest wisdom, answers with a resounding no. Jewish thought insists that the ethical is never suspended. A God of goodness cannot command what is truly evil. Therefore, the real test is always one of discernment, of wrestling, of using our God-given moral compass to understand what God truly wants from us. The story's climax is not the raised knife, but the voice that says, stop. That is the essential moment, the return to ethics, the affirmation of life. There's another partner in this covenant, one who is silenced in the text, but whose voice our tradition insists we must hear: Sarah. The Midrash tells us that the broken blast of the shofar are the echo of her prayers and her cries from that night. Sarah could not sleep. A chill had entered the tent, having nothing to do with the night air. She had heard a voice, a command meant only for Abram, but a mother's ears are tuned to the frequency of her child's name. Isaac, sacrifice. The words hung in the darkness, impossible and absolute. When Abraham left before dawn, she followed. She kept her distance, a shadow among the rocks. And as she walked, she did not think of God's power or of obedience. She thought of God's promise, the promise of laughter, the promise of life from her aged body, the promise that this boy, her Isaac, was the future. She remembered her fallings. She remembered casting Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness, sacrificing another mother's child for her own fear. The memory was a hot coal in her heart. She knew what it was to let fear override compassion. And she knew with a certain that came from her own painful experience that this could not be the ultimate will of God. A God of promise could not also be a God of child sacrifice. It could not be true. When they reached the mountain, she hid herself in a cleft of a rock. She watched Abraham build the altar. She watched him bind her son. She could not scream. Her throat was a knot of grief. So she prayed. She prayed not against God, but to God, to the God of the covenant, to the God of promise. She prayed, let Abraham see you. Let him see the real you. The you that promised me laughter. Let him hold fast to that promise, not to this terrible command. Remind him that our covenant is a dialogue, not a decree. And when the angel's voice finally shattered the silence, Abraham, Abraham, she wept with upheld joy. The God of promise had indeed won. The sound that tore from her soul was both grief and triumph, and it became the first shofar blast, declaring for all time that love is stronger than fear, that covenant is stronger than command. My friends, we find ourselves in a world and in lives that often feel morally baffling. Voices all around us and voices from deep within us, amplified by fear and rage, tell us that for the sake of security, of righteousness, or simple survival, we must suspend our ethics. The voice of fear commands us, build higher walls around your hearts. The world is dangerous. Do not be vulnerable. Sacrifice your compassion on the altar of your own security. The voice of anger commands us, lash out. You have been wronged. You have been hurt. Do not seek understanding. Seek retribution. Sacrifice your capacity for forgiveness on the altar of your own righteousness. The voice of despair commands us, give up. The world is broken beyond repair. Your small acts mean nothing. Do not hope, do not try. Sacrifice your sense of agency on the altar of your own weariness. These are the commands that tear our world apart. And they are the commands that can tear our own souls apart. They tell us that to protect ourselves, we must harden our hearts. That to be right, we must refuse to see the humanity in those who are wrong. That to survive, we must stop believing in a better world. And we, as Jews, are caught in the middle. We are people who have known profound suffering and who carry a history of vulnerability. We look at the world and ask, where is the God who promised to protect us? We see the moral corrosion in our societies, the casual cruelty, the celebration of power over justice, and we ask, where is the God of righteousness? The Akedah, in all its wrenching complexity, gives us a path. It teaches us that true faith is not the silencing of our moral consciousness. True faith is to wrestle. It is to hold the promise of a just and compassionate God against the terrible reality of a world filled with violence and suffering, and to refuse to let it go. It is to insist, even to God, even to the most powerful voices inside ourselves, that the covenant of justice and mercy must hold. This is not about finding easy answers. People of conscience will always struggle with the right path. But it is about holding fast to our moral center whilst navigating complexity. As individuals, we carry particular loves and fears. We stand against all hatreds and hold fast to hope for those we love. We have a deep attachment to our families, to our community, our people. These loyalties run in our very veins, And because they matter so deeply to us, we can hold also the space for grief over another's pain, for recognition of the divine image in every soul, for the conviction that our own security and another's humanity are not opposing forces, but can and must coexist. It is an agonizing balance, but it is the holy work of our covenant. This Rosh Hashanah, I'm asking you to renew your commitment to the covenant of active partnership with the divine, as I do. This means we continue asking hard questions, not because we lack faith, but because our faith is strong enough to wrestle with the commands of fear and anger. It means trusting that our faithfulness and our moral conscience can walk hand in hand, that our love for our own people and our commitment to justice for all people can both be honored. The shofar we're about to hear carries Sarah's voice of determined hope, Abraham's courageous challenge, and our own call to partnership with God. It declares that the promise of justice and compassion still hold, that we and God are bound together in the work of healing this world, starting with the world inside each of us. We begin this new year not with easy answers, but with renewed courage to test the commanding voices of our time against the enduring promise of our tradition. We begin by truly seeing one another, holding space for our complicated loyalties and our shared hope for a world that reflects the divine image within us all. That work is possible. That future is reachable. And we do not walk alone. Shana Tova. And as the wardens set up for the Torah service, I invite you already to find in your